What's up, everyone? Back with another episode of TPC Army Podcast. Hey, we have Paul. Paul is the owner of NootropicsDepot, and we're talking just before we recorded. And my first order with NootropicsDepot was back in 2020, and it was for Nootropics and Lion's Mane. And I remember back in the day, you guys had amoxapine. Like there were so many cool things, and then things got kind of dropped off as laws changed. But then there's been so many new things coming out. So
Yeah.
I'd like to let's start from the beginning because I actually don't know how the company started. Like I don't know your
Sure.
background at all. I just know you have amazing products. So let's kind of start there.
Okay. Yeah. And ironically, so you said December 4th, 2020, right?
Yep.
December 7th, 2021 is when we were raided by the federal government. So
I missed that. What happened?
yeah. Oh yeah. We went through a bad time. So let me go back to the very beginning and tell the whole story from the start. So if we go way back to how I got into this industry, I've been a biohacker, supplement enthusiast for a long time. I went through a pretty bad depression when I was younger, coming out of high school into college, and I almost took my life on a number of occasions. And everybody's depression's different. Mine was very much like nothingness. It was just complete and utter nothingness. Some people get sad, some people get, they have mood swings. Mine was just complete nothing. So when I came out of it, I hit rock bottom. And when you hit rock bottom, depending on, why you're hitting rock bottom, you always have to make a choice. Are you going to either stay in it, end your life, or do something to pull yourself out of it? And I decided the latter. And after I started coming out of my depression, I started to go, okay, why? Why did my brain go through what it went through? I wanted to understand the body, the brain, how to enhance it, and then also understand depression. Why did my brain go through that? And how do I prevent myself from going through it again? And how do I prevent other people from going through it again? And that set me off on my journey of psychopharmacology, neurochemistry, and I was in a completely different industry at the time. I was doing telecommunications. So I was actually flying all over the world, teaching people how to install telecom systems, big, telephone networks at, Fortune 50 companies. And I wasn't really passionate about it. That's just what I was doing at the time. So I started learning more about the body, the brain, started learning about nootropics, and nootropics, for anybody that don't know, they're technically pronounced nootropics, but I always say nootropics. They are compounds that are neuroprotective and enhance your cognition. So they're either neuroprotective or they're safe. So that was kind of the moniker that was coined in 1954 by a Romanian scientist. And essentially, it's a cognitive enhancer that's not going to harm yourself. Where you got amphetamine, Adderall is a cognitive enhancer, but it's neurotoxic. So it's not considered a nootropic because it's not safe. So I started getting into nootropics, and I was buying from the available vendors at the time. And we would, be talking about piracetam. And this was early days.
Yeah.
Very early. Pyridinol, piracetam, aniracetam, some of the earlier racetams. And I was on Longevity at the time. And I didn't know a lot about neurochemistry. I started reading research papers, reading books, interacting with people on Longevity, but more from a passive sense. I was trying to learn at the time. And then I found Reddit. r/nootropics started around that time. This was around 2011, I think. And so I started going over to Reddit from Longevity, and same thing there. I started interacting, but I was a little bit more comfortable at that time. I had learned enough to go, okay, I'm able to participate now. I'm going to go back and forth with the people on r/nootropics. So we would find research papers, post them, talk about them, go, hey, look at this interesting paper on piracetam. Oh, look at this interesting paper on the NMDA receptor or the AMPA receptor. And after a while, the moderators of our nootropics decided, hey, we like the way you interact with people. Would you like to become a moderator? And I said, yeah, sure. So I actually became a moderator of r/nootropics. And pretty quickly, I realized there's a big problem in the nootropics community. I was buying from the available vendors at the time, and the quality was horrible. We were all buying from people that were selling in Mylar bags. We would get these bags in. They
Yep.
sometimes not have a label with a lot number, paper printed labels. And then you'd open it up and there'd be residual solvents dripping out. There'd be cat hair in it. You'd ask them, hey, is this really piracetam? And you would have no way of actually knowing. So there were a couple instances in the r/Nootropics community that made me realize something needed to change. So there were some people on our Nootropics that bought pyridinol, or what they thought was pyridinol. And pyridinol is one of the original nootropics. It's piracetam and pyridinol. There's argument which one was the first one, but pyridinol is 2 vitamin B6 molecules bonded together by a disulfide bridge. The people that were on the forum at the time bought pyridinol from this vendor, took it, and then went to the hospital because it wasn't pyridinol. It was actually mislabeled diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl.
That's a difference.
Yeah. The vendor at the time, I won't name who it was. I don't think they exist anymore, but they bought from China. China labeled it pyridinol, clearly did no testing, sold it labeled pyridinol, but it was actually Benadryl. And a bunch of people were overdosing on Benadryl, which Benadryl is an anti-nootropic. It's a deliriant. So I said, okay, something has to be done. If we're going to be a nootropics community where we can talk about these interesting cognitive enhancers and, oh, hey, I tried this, these are the effects I got, we have to know that it is that thing at bare minimum. So I decided to start getting donations from the Reddit community, and I would go out and I'd buy products that people thought were fake or impure. I'd send them to analytical testing labs, and then I'd call the companies out if there was something wrong. And that's kind of the reputation I got, being the bulldog, going after the bad actors. And frankly, I was pissed, right? Like, I'm a consumer myself, and I was buying these nootropic compounds, and I was getting misled by these brands that were doing absolutely no lab testing or quality control at all. So it kind of formed my worldview at the start of this industry. There's a lot of bad actors in here, and somebody needs to be looking out for the consumers. So that's kind of the mission I went on. I set up a program where we would, people would say, hey, I think this is fake. We would go and buy them. We'd test them. I'd call the companies out. And it became this community on Reddit where I got a pretty big following of people that were appreciative of me trying to hold people accountable. And after a while, I decided it doesn't help anyone if I'm saying, hey, this is fake. These guys suck. If I don't have anybody to point to that these guys are good. Yeah. So I decided to start a company where lab testing and quality control were the cornerstone. And that's what set off me starting this company. And that was June 2013. So we just had our 13-year anniversary. But really, it's been an exercise in being lied to and losing trust in everybody over the years. I fully intended to do what pretty much every brand in the industry does. Use really good contract manufacturers, use really good contract labs, and just do things right. So in the beginning, we would use contract manufacturers. And in the very beginning, I did it out of my house. But then the contract manufacturers would lie to us. They would screw batches up. We had a batch that was contaminated with black mold, and they wouldn't accept responsibility for it. So I said, okay, I can't, trust any of these things unless I can personally oversee it. So I built a CGMP certified manufacturing facility. And then same thing with labs. I was sending to the labs at the time, big labs, small labs, all the labs out there have problems. And they started lying to me. I started asking, as I started understanding analytical chemistry more, I'm like, okay, show me the back end data. Show me the chromatogram. Show me this. And they would either say, no, we're not showing you that. That's our information. I'm like, I paid you to test this. It's my chromatogram. Or they would show me the back end data and it wouldn't make sense. The numbers wouldn't match the COA that I was given. So I'm like, okay, I can't even trust these labs. So I built a ISO accredited analytical testing lab. So that's what we have now as Omniant Labs. And really that's been an exercise across the entire vertically integrated part of the nootropics or the supplement industry. I decided, hey, if I'm going to put my name on something, I need to be able to personally oversee it because I'm taking these products, I'm giving these products to my friends, my family. In the early days, it was all nootropics. These are supposed to enhance your cognition, be neuroprotective, to be safe. To do that, you need to do a lot of analytical chemistry. Then it just kind of snowballed from there. I built a very vertically integrated team here in Arizona. We have about 95 employees now. We got, I think, 80 or 90,000 square foot facility. And we're doing really, really interesting, cool, novel stuff. We're doing science that nobody else in the world's doing. We're doing product formulations that nobody else in the world's doing. And I've actually been thinking lately exactly about what you were thinking about. Why do not more people know about us? Like we're the tip of the spear. We're doing things that no other brand in the world is even thinking of doing, much less actually making reality. And I think part of the reason is I'm a controversial figure because I got into this industry the way I did, being somebody that just goes right into the storm and calls bad actors out. And frankly, some of those people that were bad actors in those early days are really bad people. I would call these companies out saying, hey, this product is fake. I would get death threats. I would, have my bank accounts try to get hacked. I had cryptocurrency stolen. I got into Bitcoin in 2010 when it was 81 cents. So I've been in cryptocurrency a long time. We had a hacking attempt where they stole, it's probably worth like $5 million, the amount of coin they stole at the time. Yeah. They would send in pictures of my employees' license plates, say they're going to come up and shoot our facility. So we had to have the Tempe police sit out in front of our facility. My house got swatted. There was just a ton of craziness because bad actors don't like being called out. And if you're in a part of the industry that is kind of a gray area, you're usually a little bit more on the sketchy side sometimes. And those type of people, they don't like their brands being shown to be frauds or selling fake stuff. So it kind of blew back on me. And for a very, very long time, nobody knew who I was. I was just Mr. You Are So Dumb on Reddit. I didn't put my name out there. I didn't put my name on the companies. Like I kept very, very private because I wanted to let my company speak for themselves. I wanted to let the brand stand on its own. I never wanted to be an influencer or, somebody that is in the spotlight.
That does podcasts.
Yeah, well, I have to do it now because I realize that people are looking for the face of an organization. They're trying to hear the story. And me just saying, hey, this is the best product, let it stand on its own, doesn't necessarily work, at least in the current paradigm. Yeah. But one of the main reasons I stayed private is because of all those death threats, because of swatting attempts, because of all these things, I had a little bit more flexibility to call out bad actors because I wasn't publicly known. But that comes with drawbacks, right? Then if you're not telling people, here's who I am, here's my story, here's, the gist of what we're doing, people make up their own stories. They weave their own narrative around who someone is or what's going on. And unfortunately, I think that culminated in what happened on December 7th, 2021.
And what exactly was that? Because so you mentioned how you guys are kind of gray area, which is interesting to me because the whole like gray area conversation in my world is more small molecule peptide, like kind of semi-pharmaceutical drugs in clinical trials. And to me, nootropics are, I know they're not certain ones, right? Yeah. But they're so closely linked to basic over-the-counter supplements. I'm surprised that there was a raid. I get like the Nootropics and Moxapines, but what was the problem? What caused that raid?
Yeah, so we're not in a gray area anymore. We're only in.
Back in the day. So what were the gray area products back then?
Well, they don't like anything synthetic. Piracetam, aniracetam, adrafinol.
Oh, wow, even those. I remember adrafinol. I got a couple bottles from you guys.
Yeah, no, and so my perspective at the time, when I got into this industry, I was a little bit naive. I was in telecommunications. My former business partner said, oh no, as long as you do it the right way, you don't call them dietary supplements, you don't make structure function claims, you don't make disease claims, you do things right, then it's legal. And I actually had a lawyer that I bounce things off of. And he said, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And if the government disagrees with you, they'll send you an enforcement letter, and then you can respond and see what the government's position is. And so that's why I got into this industry thinking, well, what we're doing is legal. And because when we sold pyrastam, anarastam, adrafenol, all those things, we called them nootropic compounds. We didn't call them dietary supplements. We didn't make structure function claims. We didn't make disease claims. We didn't say, hey, you can treat this with this compound. We kept it very like professional sort of. My perspective was people are taking these things, right? They're still taking these things. Me getting rated didn't make pyrastam and adrafenol go away. It just made it more sketchy. So my perspective at the time was there's this whole community of people using nootropics. They need access to pure quality tested stuff, or else they're harming themselves. So if this community exists and there's a pathway to do it legally, I should do it legally and make sure that it is done right. Well, and my perspective always was, A, I think it's legal, and B, I think the government agrees. And it was always those two things that I operated on. And I said, if any one of those two things is wrong, I'll stop. Even if I think it's legal, if the government disagrees, I'm not here to fight the federal government, right? Like it's a losing battle. The United States federal government is the most powerful government in the history of humanity. I'm not going to be an enemy of them. So my perspective always was, if they disagreed with me, they disagreed with what I was doing, they would send me an enforcement letter. And they didn't. All of our competitors were getting enforcement letters. Peak Nootropics, Absorb Health, everybody was getting enforcement letters because they were doing clearly illegal things, making disease claims, making structure function claims, calling it a dietary supplement. All of these things that when you read the statutes, you're like, yeah, no, that's not allowed. We weren't doing any of those things. So naively, and we weren't getting enforcement letters. So naively, I'm like, we're the shining star of this industry. We're the only ones going to bat for the consumers. And we operated like that. And looking back now, I just didn't know what I didn't know. And a lot of people don't realize the FDA is bifurcated into two. There's FDA regulatory, which is what everybody knows, the FDA. That's the enforcement letters. That's everything you see publicly. FDA, that's regulatory. That's a civil regulatory agency, kind of like the SEC. Then there's the OCI, which is the Office of Criminal Investigations. The OCI operates like the FBI. They're special agents. They're exactly the same thing as FBI agents. And in some cases, OCI agents are a more prestigious position than FBI agents, but they act very kind of in the shadows. So you don't really see a lot of what they do. So us not getting an enforcement letter, I thought, well, if the government disagreed with me, they'd send me an enforcement letter. They're sending all my competitors enforcement letters. What I didn't know, if you're under active criminal investigation, they suppress enforcement letters from going out because the OCI doesn't want their criminal investigation screwed up by regulatory, which they're not supposed to do. They're supposed to share information. It's supposed to be, let's protect the consumers. And if something's going on that they feel is dangerous for consumers, the quicker you correct it is better for, the American public. But that's not the way the OCI works. So the OCI is partially funded by asset forfeiture. So FDA regulatory, it's just tax dollars. They get their money. It operates much like any other government agency. The OCI, they actually economically benefit from watching people, investigating them, waiting for them to make a lot of money so that they can come in, charge you criminally, and seize all the assets. So unfortunately, I think I got caught in the crosshairs, and what I think set it off, it's a lot of it's still sealed, so I can't really know. But 3 months before we got raided, two competitors that I had called out years before for selling fake product entered into sealed plea agreements with the government. So they got raided by the federal government because they were way across the line. They were selling all sorts of stuff that they shouldn't have. And then they entered into sealed plea agreements, and then 3 months later, we got raided. And it was crazy. Our parking lot was full of black SUVs. We got raided by over 50 armed federal agents from 6 federal agencies at gunpoint. They descended on our building, surround the building, held my warehouse guys at gunpoint, telling them drop the box when they were just carrying printer toner, like full on raid.
Yeah, you're just taking your Nootropics.
Yeah, and they didn't like Nootropics. Actually, it was kind of weird. Like the things that they had issues with didn't make sense.
Yeah,
we got a big list. They were there for, I think, like 21 hours. They had 4 semi trucks that backed up to our facility. They tore everything apart.
yeah,
And they seized or destroyed $4.5 million worth of stuff that day.
that's nice of them.
And we got a big list at the end of the day. Here's the stuff we took. There was a bunch on that list that they say they took was still at our facility. There was stuff that wasn't on the list that they had took. It was a very disorganized sort of raid, because I think they thought they were coming into something else.
Yeah.
They were misled by these competitors they had called out years prior. And unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished. Me trying to, advocate for the consumers and hold bad actors accountable, I think blew back on me. But after about 2 hours, they calmed down. They realized, oh shit, I think we came into something a little bit different than we were told. But the federal government does not like to admit they're wrong. So it set off a 2-year process of trying to solve this with the federal government. And luckily, that's a whole story in itself. I hired what I thought were good attorneys. They didn't know what they were doing. They were marching me to prison. Eventually, I realized it. I hired the former U.S. attorney for the District of Arizona, Paul Charlton, as my personal criminal defense attorney. I hired George Karavestos, who was the former director of the FDA OCI. So he was their former boss.
Yeah,
as the corporate criminal defense attorney. I hired the former U.S. attorney for the District of New Hampshire, where they were out of. That's where the investigation was being run out of. So eventually I hired their former boss and really high profile lawyers that got in there and calmed everybody down, and we were able to come to a amicable solution. I say amicable, but I had no choice. But so yeah, and really their issue with things is we could do a whole podcast on the regulatory side of things, because I think a lot of people misunderstand the legalities of operating in this space. So in almost every industry in the United States, for you to be charged criminally, there has to be something called mens rea, or mental state. You have to know or should have known that you were breaking the law to be charged criminally. So mens rea is just kind of a constant whenever you see criminal charges. There is an exception to that Congress wrote. If you're an FDA-regulated business, that doesn't apply. If you're an owner of an FDA-regulated business, your company could be breaking the law. You don't even have to know about it for you to be personally charged criminally.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Something called strict liability. And I believe there's 2 industries in the United States where strict liability apply. FDA-regulated businesses and airlines. So Congress had said, hey, if mistakes go wrong in FDA-regulated businesses and airline businesses, people die. So we need to have this strict liability component there so that the owners of these companies know that, hey, it's not just, oh, I didn't know that was happening. You need to make sure you understand your whole business, or else we're going to charge you personally criminally. So I think a lot of people out there don't realize that, especially the owners of these companies still operating in the nootropic space.
Yeah.
And I've said it a few times since it happened. I'm like, guys, if you're listening to me right now, get out. Like, get out.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Man, that's a crazy. So I appreciate, what's that?
The government does not think the way you think, and the way everybody operates in that side of the industry, they're very mistaken on the policies and aims of the federal government.
And I know somewhat of that more from the pharmaceutical side of things, not directly with the over-the-counter side of things, legality-wise. So it's super interesting to see the commonalities there. But it's cool for me to hear the backstory of everything, because I just love the company and the products for all this time. And I think so. What we kept talking about there was also the testing, right? People having bad quality products and things like that. I don't get involved in drama. I don't do that. So we focus on your product, your good company and everything. But the cool thing about it with you guys is I have so many athletes in these professional sports, and you pop for a drug test, you're losing millions of dollars. Right. And your company was one of them that I could keep sending people back to. And so I had like my maybe not my go-to list of like all the traditional things I'd use, but some of the basics ones were always there because the testing, because I'd send everything out third party, get it tested myself, no matter
Okay.
over-the-counter supplement, peptide, small molecule, pharmaceutical, because I just in case, because I've had C of A's, obviously, like you said, lied to. People pay things off. Like if you're in that industry, you know what's going on in the background, right? So just to check out everything I've ever tested from you guys checked out perfectly. So it kept living up to that, and that's been for years.
Yeah, and I think I got into this industry for that, and I'm ingesting all these things. I take like 50 supplements a day. A lot of what we do these days is because I want access to an interesting new compound, so we develop it. So I'm personally taking it. I'm giving it to my wife. I'm giving it to my son. I'm giving it to my dog. I have a longevity stack for my 16-year-old dog.
Yeah.
So I internally know I need to make sure that everything's done right, and I need to understand it. But yeah, it's hard, right? And I think part of what I've learned over the years is, I think it's probably any industry. You really don't know what you don't know until you get down into the thick of it. And we are so ingrained in every aspect of this industry now. We've seen it all. And a lot of people don't realize we do a lot of stuff in the background of the industry that, nobody really hears about. We're on the AOAC functional fungi advisory board for setting the standards for testing mushrooms.
Which makes sense with tiger's milk and everything.
Yep. I run, so we founded a nonprofit called the Future Nutri Foundation because I was going out calling out bad actors all over the industry and getting all that blowback. Eventually my team and my family said, you got to stop. Just stop.
Chill.
Our business. But I'm not built that way. When I see something going wrong, when I see a consumer getting taken advantage of, I just get so angry that I can't let it stand. And I think what really upsets me is now that I've seen the whole back end, the whole fabric of this industry, I understand why it is the way it is, right? You've got the AHPA, you've got the Natural Products Association, you've got all these industry organizations. All of them are industry organizations that are representing the brands in this industry. And they are absolutely needed. Not saying they're not. We absolutely need these industry organizations to advocate for the brands, because the federal government, a lot of people probably don't realize, back in the 90s, back before the 1994 Dietary Supplement Control Act, stores were getting raided at gunpoint for CoQ10, coenzyme Q10. You can find old newspaper articles where the OCI, the same guys that raided us, rated like GNCs for selling coenzyme Q10. And then Congress said, hey, this needs to stop. We need to put legislation in place to separate supplements from drugs so that we can calm them down. But what I've seen in the background of the industry now, I think the federal government wishes that had never happened and that they could regulate supplements like drugs.
Yeah.
So we need industry organizations to advocate for the brands, advocate for the industry, and protect it from over-regulation. We have a very vibrant natural products industry now, and having it completely destroyed would be in nobody's best interest. But all those industry organizations advocating for the industry, for the brands, for the ingredients, for all of this stuff that happens on the background, there's no industry organization that advocates for consumers. Not a single one of them in their charter is saying, hey, we are here to advocate on behalf of the consumer. So a really frustrating thing for me is these industry organizations are funded by the brands, right? They're not going to hold the brands accountable for doing wrong things because that's who's funding the organization itself. So all these industry organizations are always too scared to kind of step up on a soapbox and go, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. Because they're afraid of upsetting the people that are actually funding them. So we set off, and I was kind of trying to be an advocate for consumers on my own, on Reddit. But eventually we're like, hey, if we really want to make a big change in this industry, we got to start our own nonprofit. And it has to be a nonprofit that is advocating for consumers first and foremost. And that's what the Future Nutri Foundation is. Because you have Consumer Lab, you have Labdoor, you have Supco. All of those are for-profit companies that are profiting off of what they're doing. Brands pay to have their stuff tested. Consumers have to pay to see the results in Consumer Lab's cases.
Yep.
They're using improper methodologies. They're they're making consumers think that they're advocating for them when they're not. They're advocating for their own wallets. So the Future Nutra Foundation is our attempt to build something that goes, hey, we need a nonprofit that advocates for consumers and consumers only, and frankly has the balls to call a spade when is necessary.
That's awesome. It's nice because it's we ran into that problem over the past couple of years where a lot of the testing, like there are the places where they will technically test for free, post up the C of A's, and then like we mentioned earlier, companies in the background are paying for the right results they want. So you can't get the right C of A for the right batch, and then they don't even post up the actual chromatogram either. It's just purity, or there's no dimer. Like there's specific parts that are kind of left out.
Not to get too far into chemistry, but even if you post up the chromatogram, that doesn't tell you anything. I didn't know that back then. I know it now. You know, when you look at a chromatogram, specifically like an HPLC or a UPLC, you see peaks, right? And let's say you're looking at a peptide chromatogram. You just see one peak, it says 100%. You're like, oh, well, that's 100% pure peptide. No. That means at that chromatographic setting, at that specific wavelength, that's the only thing it could see on the UV detector. So you can develop your methods in such a way that show you one thing, and that peak might not even be the peptide you're talking about or the compound you're talking about. It might be something completely different. So actual analytical chemistry behind testing is much, much more complex than people realize. And I think a lot of people would be very surprised how bad that side of the industry is. And what you said, send a sample in, get a result back. No testing was really done. We call that dry labbing. And there's a bunch
of
that
term, dry labbing.
Dry labbing, because no chemistry is actually happening, right? Yep. It's just the dry lab. Because if you go into a lab, there's lots of solvents, there's lots of stuff going on. A dry lab, none of that's happening. So dry labs are absolutely a problem. There's a bunch of them out there right now. But a much bigger problem is legitimate labs doing shitty science. And sometimes it's on purpose. Sometimes they're purposely building the methods to show what the brands want. And then other times they just don't know what they don't know. So that's why I started Omniant Labs, to be able to be the tip of the spear on the analytical chemistry side and go, okay, if we want to test for the quality of these products, we have to use methods that are fit for purpose and methods that are actually telling us what we think they're telling us.
Let's get into that then. So for the person out there who doesn't get into analytical chemistry, they've never seen any of these kind of reporting results, break it down for them, and then also make sure you break it down for the other people that do have these companies out there that I think certain people, like you said, it's not that they're doing it to be deceitful. I just think they don't know what they don't know. So I think digging into that could be super cool.
So when you test a product on its fundamental level, you have to do minimum two things: identity and assay, or purity. And a lot of consumers think the word purity means something it doesn't. But the first one is always identity, right? If you're selling something, let's say it's lion's mane, you have to prove that it's lion's mane, right? If you say this is lion's mane fruiting body, you have to prove it's lion's mane fruiting body, first and foremost. That's in the regulations. That is the fundamental basis behind 21 CFR 111 quality guidelines. You have to prove that what you're claiming on the label is what it is. Now, I think the big problem is people misunderstand the way regulations are written. The FDA doesn't come and say, this is how you do that. They just say, you have to do that. You have to do it right. You have to justify it. And if we disagree with you, we can come in and you have to defend yourself. So it lets people kind of do it on their own. Like, here's how I think we should test for the identity of lion's mane. And that's where you get into the weeds. So for a long time, people were using UV-Vis a lot to test for things. And UV-Vis is really just a UV detector where you put a sample on it. You either put it on top of a little diamond where a laser shoots up into it, or you put it into a liquid where the laser shoots through it. That's either reflectance or transmission. And then it gives you a chromatogram of, and it's not really a chromatogram, it's just a visualization of the carbon signals in the sample. And for a long time, UV-Vis was, it's actually not carbon signals, but it's chromophores. But people were using UV-Vis improperly to, like, Bacopa. They were saying, all right, this is a 50% Bacopa side extract. And they would run it on UV-Vis, and they would get a signal, a messy signal, and go, all right, we're quantifying it. Here's 50% bacopicides. Well, eventually people realized that's not a very good way to measure the amount of stuff inside of something. So they developed new methods via HPLC to measure them. And then suddenly now there was half the bacopicides that everybody thought, because the machine was being improperly used. So for identity and assay, you need to select the methodology, the machine, that is going to best answer the question that you're asking. So first and foremost, you ask, is this that thing? So what we use, like specifically for lion's mane, we use high performance thin layer chromatography to show, all right, this is lion's mane, it's fruiting body, there's no other signals in it. And that's really the best way to, at least on a regular QC basis, figure out, is this what I think it is? Because it gives you a chromatographic fingerprint that you can match up. And then you have to determine, is what I think is in there at the concentration that I'm saying it is? So if I say, like our Arinamax is was the world's first arenosine A standardized lion's mane mycelium, we say, okay, there's 0.5% arenosine A in there. To do that, then you have to assay and figure out, okay, here's the arenosine A, here's a known reference standard, this, do the math, and this is what's in there. So on its fundamental level, you always do ID and assay. And I say assay, you have to do assay if you're making claims as to what is in it, like how much is in it. If you're just saying this is lion's mane, you could just do ID, but that's been a thing that I've advocated against for a long time, because lion's mane isn't doing the work. It's the bioactive compounds in lion's mane that are doing the work. You could take lion's mane with no bioactives in it, and it's not going to do what you expect lion's mane to do. So standardization to bioactive compounds has been a big mission of mine to get out there. It's not good enough just to prove that it is lion's mane. You have to prove that it is good lion's mane. It's going to do what people expect. So
no, keep going. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you set me off on analytical chemistry, and I'll ramble for a long time about the details. But
no, please do, because that's, I think, from the testing aspect side of things, that's the different types of testing, the assays people don't quite understand. So they'll get it, whatever, they'll get a Januszek test or they'll get whatever analytical test back. They won't know how to interpret it. So there's a supplement, a peptide. You're looking at obviously different testing methods, but still assay and what exactly is in there. I used to have an older machine back then till my kids broke it. Wasn't that accurate at all, but playing around with that stuff at home, I think super interesting for people. And those like a 20, 30 grand model. So it obviously wasn't the best one out there. Some of my friends had the nice, 750K, 1.5 million models, and those are fun to play with. But yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent. Either way.
And you got to know what you're doing. So if we go back to peptides for a minute, because I think you're probably very interested in it. A lot of people are out there right now. A lot of people probably don't realize we started that. So we sold peptides back in 2013. And a lot of these peptides that are on the market now, we brought out. So we were the first people in the United States to sell BPC 157, as an example.
I didn't know that. That's cool. Okay, wait, what year is that? You said
2013.
Okay. That's so when did you guys stop with the peptides?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did it for 3 years. So that was my other company, Nootropics. And we were kind of really into the advanced side of things, peptides, novel synthetic compounds. We developed some of the compounds that are on the market, and I made them and named them. So Adamax is my peptide. I created that structure and named it. We were the first people to do CMAX and Solank in nasal sprays. Before that, you had to buy the Russian drops. So we brought it out in vials and in nasal sprays. Then we did N-acetyl CMAX, N-acetyl Solank. We were the first ones to amidate the end of it. So the N-acetyl, you're protecting the N-acetyl end. Amidate, you're protecting the other side of the peptide from enzymatic degradation. And then we created peptides we never even released, some experimental ones that I used on myself. But yeah, we really got into that side of the industry more from a nootropic standpoint, a longevity standpoint. Of course, we had CGC 1295 and ipamorelin and all these other ones, and then we had MK 677. Like we were doing a lot of really cool advanced stuff. But the analysis of peptides is a lot more difficult than people realize, because peptides are not like other small molecule organics where it's covalent bonds between the compounds in it. They're called peptide bonds, which are much weaker, and they're made up of amino acids. So peptides are just amino acids put into chains, and then eventually they get long enough and they become proteins. So proteins are just big chains of peptides. Peptides are just big chains of amino acids. So to properly analyze them, especially ones that are more advanced, it's difficult because you need reference standards. So what I think a lot of people don't realize when you're doing analytical chemistry to assay the concentration of something, if you don't have a reference standard for that thing, you can't do that properly because you have no reference for what pure, ipamorelin should look like. And because they're peptides, the peptide bonds get hydrolyzed in water. So your sample prep and your machine settings have to be such that they don't break the peptides down. So sometimes you have to do pre-column derivatization, because the other thing, when you're using an HPLC or a UPLC, the most common detector on it is a UV detector. So a UV detector is an ultraviolet light detector, and it shines ultraviolet light through the sample, and then you get a chromatogram, the thing that you usually see. What people don't realize is that peak is only going to show up if the molecule that you're testing has a chromophore. And a chromophore is a double carbon bonded conjugated pi system. So if you look at a molecular structure, if you see a bunch of double carbon bonds, it has a chromophore. If you don't, it doesn't. If it doesn't have a chromophore, then the HPLC can't see it. So sometimes you have to do pre-column derivatization, attach something to the peptide that has a chromophore, that you then measure that thing, and you do the math to figure out what the purity of the peptide is. But so testing for both the identity and purity of peptides was very difficult in the early days when we didn't have reference standards for them. Now, companies out there, because peptides have become so popular, there's reference standards. It makes it a little bit easier to analyze.
I love that so I never get to have this conversation with anyone because we usually don't get into these publicly, but that's been like my hardest challenge because usually I'm helping to bring these new molecules to market. So like right. SLU PP332, we did that in the 2018 Olympics. And back then, like no one's talking about that. That wasn't even a thing. Right. Then there was the 915, then MK777. And like now we have like S-mitoconic acid 5-ethyl ester and TCAP1. And I have all these new molecules that I've slowly helped bring to the market. But getting that first reference standard and finding like, where's your pivot point, right? Like, where do you actually start? That's been the hardest part. That's been a challenge,
Quantitative NMR. Quantitative NMR is your answer there.
Yeah.
So that's how we did it in the early days. If we're like, okay, we need to bring out this peptide, we need to figure out, is it the peptide we think it is, and what's the purity? And you don't have a reference standard, so you can't make an HPLC or a UPLC method. You have to send it for quantitative NMR. And then usually it's a proton NMR, and then you get a full characterization of what's in there and how much is in there.
And that's actually the route we started to go over the past. When I say we, I mean, because I work with a bunch of different chemists and everything, because I can't do that myself. I don't have accessibility like that, but I know everyone that has that accessibility. And it's been really nice because you're able to advance, and I don't want to make any money off the peptides. Like clothoprotein peptide 1. Everyone's going to be talking about that in a couple of years. We've had that in the back for 3 or 5 years. And the things you see from an overall longevity healing-based aspect, like it's kind of hard to argue, but it's cool to have access to those kinds of people. And that's why like I'm pumped we're having this conversation, because if we go now away from the peptides, because I'll go off on too long, get back to the supplements, Nootropics Depot, because we'll both just keep rambling. Now that we know, okay, we have a little more understanding of the analytical chemistry. We understand Nootropics Depot has the best nootropics out there, right? We understand quality's there, purity, testing. Company's awesome. You're a cool guy. Cool. Let's get to the products, right? I think, because if not, we're gonna talk for way too long and not get to the actual products themselves.
I could ramble for 8 hours on chemistry.
We're gonna do another podcast then, because I think that'd be another cool one just to talk back and forth about.
Yeah.
But supplement wise, so we know some of the popular ones that are out there, like at least for me, like the go-to ones pretty much daily, the Lion's Mane 8-to-1, the Tiger's Milk for the NGF mimetic, the micronized
Yep.
pregnenolone. I've actually been liking the micronized pregnenolone while I do inhalable hydrogen. I'll get more sigma 1 receptor neuroplastic changes, so I'll do that when I'm working, when I'm doing any kind of like academic work. My daughter loves saffron. Just that 30 milligrams a day, just a little more GABAergic balance, that kind of shielding of blue light aspects is pretty cool. So many cool things already out there. I want to know what's coming out. I think one of the newer, not newer, but newish, is the fiber one that I don't think people realize how cool that is. Because you guys took into account viscosity, fermentability, solubility. I haven't found another one out there that accounted for those in more variables. So let's start with the fiber, and then let's go to some new ones too.
Well, I think that's a good example of what makes us different. And we've been thinking about that a lot lately because, with my history, our whole thing is, what's our differentiator? Well, we do lab testing and quality control properly. We're transparent. We show everybody this. We're open, honest. And I think that has stopped working because now everybody says it. Now everybody says they do lab testing, quality control, transparency. They're all lying, but they say it. So a consumer doesn't know what's real and what's not. So I've been thinking about what really makes us different. Because when we started this, you said, why don't more people know about you? And I think it's just, we're not very good at marketing. You could probably tell I'm much more passionate about the science, the chemistry, the product formulation. That's my passion. Selling the products it's not my thing. So, but to sell the products, I think we need to kind of come back and go, what makes us different? Who is Nootropics Depot and what really differentiates us? Of course, the lab testing, of course, the transparency, but what is really something that people can't just go, oh yeah, us too. And it's the complexity of our formulation. So we always go back to the drawing board. When we want to develop something like the fiber, we sit down, and sometimes it takes us years. Some of our products took 6 years to develop because we have to do a lot of legwork in the beginning to understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. So with fiber, I personally started seeing the instances of colon cancer and rectal cancer going up in younger and younger people. We had, a pretty famous instance of it, a death recently with James Vanderbeek, the guy from Dawson's Creek that died. He was 48. He had 6 kids. 48 years old, a wealthy, well-known, probably has access to all the medical high-end stuff in the world. And he died at 48 from colon and rectal cancer. So I started seeing that, and I was seeing it a few years back, and I took a hard look inward, and I said, you know what, I'm not doing what I need to be doing for my own health. I'm not consuming enough fiber, and I'm like, I don't even know what fiber is. Until you really jump into something, you can think you know what it is. Like everybody thinks they know what protein is, but they don't. Just like everybody thinks they know what fiber is. So we sat down and said, okay, what is fiber? What is fiber doing? How does it work? And that's where we rapidly came to the conclusion, all right, there's 4 main types of fiber. There's soluble, insoluble, pretty self-explanatory. Do they dissolve in an aqueous solution? And then fermentable and non-fermentable. And you can have a mixture of those. So fermentable means it ferments by the probiotics in your system. Non-fermentable means it doesn't. So you can have soluble, fermentable, insoluble, fermentable, soluble, non-fermentable, insoluble, non-fermentable. And what a lot of people don't realize is, and I think growing up in the United States, you probably saw Metamucil commercials when you were growing up.
Yeah, the old people chomping on the bars.
Yeah, old people putting Metamucil into a glass. And I think it conditioned us as we grew up to go, well, that's an old person thing, When I'm 70, maybe I'll have to worry about my fiber and I'll have to dump some Metamucil into a glass. And I unfortunately, I think it made people not treat fiber seriously. And what's been happening is it should be a 5-alarm fire. Younger and younger people are dying from colon and rectal cancer. And the colon and rectal cancer is happening at a different place in the colon. A lot of people aren't talking about that either. There's the proximal colon and there's the distal colon. A lot of what we're seeing recently is distal colon cancer, which is why it's colon and rectal cancer. It's further down the pipe, so to speak. And the reason for that is 95% of Americans aren't getting the required fiber in their diets every day. 95%. It's basically everybody. You walk out on the street, basically everybody you point to isn't getting enough fiber. And I think that's because fundamentally people don't understand what fiber is. So fiber is food for your microbiome. That's the fermentable portion of the fibers. So you have a whole microbiome inside of your system, and a lot of what is coming out recently is our mood, our memory, our cognition, our cardiovascular health. All of that is very, very closely tied to our microbiome. It's not just us. We are definitely a series of organisms that are all working together to be who we are. So the microbiome research has come out recently that the more diversity you have in your microbiome and the specific types of bacteria that you have in your microbiome really affect a lot in your life. And some really interesting research that I think people haven't looked at is they took a stool sample from an athlete and they put that into an obese person, and the obese person became more athletic. And they did the opposite. They took an obese person's stool and put it into an athlete, and it made the athlete less athletic. So I wouldn't want to be that
real quick, because I love that research, right? To me, I'm seeing that more of like a mitochondrial biome shift and change that then screws up cell tunneling nanotubule communication with mitochondria from bacterial drive. Is that what you kind of got from the research? Or?
There's a lot. It's super complex. So there's that. There's the gut-brain axis.
Yep.
Most of the serotonin in your body is made in your gut. Dopamine is made in your gut. Norepinephrine. There's a lot of stuff that is made in your gut. And specifically, some of the more interesting ones are short-chain fatty acids, propionate, butyrate. And those are then go on to do other things in your body. So I liken it to a city, right? Let's say your microbiome is a city. It's a diverse city. You've got buildings, you've got people, you've got areas of the city that there's more people, you've got areas of the city that are less people. Now imagine that the food for the city comes in one place, right? Because that's the way our GI tract is. It's a long tube. The food always comes from one place. And if the people that live in that part of the city eat it right away, all the food, well, the rest of your city is not going to be very healthy because you're not getting food where it needs to go further down the line. So that's where the viscosity, the solubility, the fermentability, all of those factors affect, okay, it's not good enough to just get a fiber into my system because a lot of what people consume is fast fermenting fiber, meaning you're only feeding the people that live right where the food comes in to the city. So what we did with Infinifiber is we looked at all of it. We said, okay, what is fiber? How does it work? And then we decided to work backwards. Where do we need to get this fiber in your GI tract? And what do we need it to do? So you need both soluble and insoluble. You need both fermentable and non-fermentable. The fermentable feeds the city. The non-fermentable provides structure to your stool and almost kind of sweeps the city. So to have a healthy city, you've got to really plan it out and make sure that the food and everything you're bringing into the city is going to get to everybody, and that it's going to feed them in the right ways, and it's going to clean the city out as it moves through.
What ratios do you have the insoluble, soluble, and fermentable, non-fermentable in?
Well, so we did a 50-50 soluble, insoluble.
Okay.
And then we did a 75-25 fermentable, non-fermentable. So it's 75% fermentable, mostly food for your microbiome. 25% is to provide structure and, cleaning out. And one of the interesting ones that we put in is called Solno. It's a resistant potato starch. And what's cool about it is it's fermentable, but it's insoluble. So most fermentable fibers are soluble. They dissolve in aqueous solution and then get fermented. Solno resists fermentation until it gets further down the GI tract. So like I was saying, the instances of colon and rectal cancer, or at least colon cancer, are happening in the distal colon, meaning the farthest point down. Having resistant starch allows it to resist being fermented until it gets further down into your colon, and then it can feed the microbiome further down so that you don't just have a healthy beginning of your colon, you have a healthy total part of your colon.
Dude, the Solno is one of my favorites because I'll take that with ivermectin to feed Bifido, then drive that polyamide flux, get more spermine and putrescine, and that combo with a little PEMF on my gut just to change
Mhm.
the electric gradients around the bacterial colonies. Like that combo has been so amazing. And it like
Right.
that Infinifiber, I've tried every fiber out there, my kids, my wife, like we've tried all of them. And this has easily not just been the best on paper, but we've been getting Vitrac gut tests all the time, and things keep improving, improving, improving. And I'm seeing that with so many people. So the science, I like whenever this, because on paper it has to make sense, but if it doesn't apply in application, kind of doesn't matter how cool it sounds on paper. But like the Infinifibers lived up to all that. So the whole
Yeah.
resistant conversation adds up to Vitrac gut tests. And I like that because they use that 16S rRNA genome sequencing and do a couple other things as well. But it's been showing some cool things. So I appreciate you guys putting so much love into that product because it really shows.
Yeah, we're working with a doctor up in Canada at the University of British Columbia called her name's Dr. Janelle Lunkin, and she's a clinician. She treats IBS patients and both children and adults, but she's also a researcher. So she has a machine where she recreates people's microbiomes in this machine where you can actually study it.
Nice.
So she gets so you can do it like I want to study just IBS patients. She can get stool samples from people with IBS and then recreate their microbiome in these bioreactors. And then we can put Infinifiber in it, we can put probiotics in it, and then we can take samples out and do full analysis. Which bacteria went up and down, which short chain fatty acids got created, even which fungal material went up. Because a lot of people don't realize your microbiome isn't just bacteria; it's fungal in nature too. There's fungi in there.
Talk about the fungi and the parasite conversation. Because I think those
Right.
are two super misunderstood ones, and people are killing off all these parasites and no more eating up with heavy metals. That's been like another thing that's been going on
Yeah.
for a while now.
Well, if you look at the instances of colon and rectal cancer going up, they are very closely related to the destruction of our diet. Americans' diet is horrible. The nutrients in our diet have been stripped out for a long time, but also our overuse of antibiotics. So I think a lot of people probably listening, at least if they're in the United States, if they go in and get sick, they talk to their doctor, they're going to get an antibiotic. And people have been conditioned so much that they get an upper respiratory tract infection, they go into their doctor, they get a Z-Pack, and it's never, bacterial, but they always get an antibiotic for that. And I think the average, I'd have to look it up, but I think the average was something ridiculous. Like Americans take antibiotics like 4 times a year.
Something
Something
was sick. Yeah, like it's a lot. It's a ridiculous amount.
ridiculous. Yeah, like you should only have antibiotics when you need them. And when you need them is when you have a bacterial infection that your body can't fight off on its own. But this overuse of antibiotics has completely destroyed our microbiome because it goes in and then it destroys all this good bacteria. And then what happens? The bad bacteria take over. You have E. coli and you have good strains of E. coli and you have bad strains of E. coli. You destroy these probiotics and then the bad strains of E. coli can take over. Or you get listeria, or you get, salmonella, you get all these other bad bacteria that normally if you had a healthy microbiome, the people would fight off. If we want to use our city analogy, you got a strong city where everybody's happy and they're all a community. You get an invading force coming in, the city can fight it off. Like, get out of here. This is our city. But if the population is all destroyed, then the bad guys can get in and start taking over the city. And then now you have a very bad, unhealthy city. So as an analogy, I think that's good for people to understand. Think of your microbiome as a city and think of the probiotics as the good people that built the city and lived there and maintain it. And the bad bacteria are the ones coming in to try and destroy it and take over the place. So, and I don't know if have you looked into phages at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just talked to the 2 big phage companies in the United States because we're developing a probiotic right now.
Oh, cool. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So we have 2 probiotics that we're in the works on, and we were thinking about putting phages in now. I think now we're going to do a standalone phage product so people can choose to use the phages or not. But so right now we're developing 2 probiotics, and we waited a long time because I wasn't a microbiologist. And when I get into something, I want to understand it. I want to know that I'm an expert in it. So that's why, it takes us a long time to do things because sometimes I got to learn them and make sure that I fully understand them. And for a long time, the microbiome I didn't understand because it's microbiology, it's bacteria, it's genetics. It's a little bit different than phytochemistry or even fungal chemistry, where we're like, okay, these are the bioactives in there. Here's how we measure them. It's life, right? So it's taken us a long time to bring out a probiotic, but we're bringing out two, and our first two, the first one's going to be a cognitive probiotic, because the gut-brain axis is something that nobody's really looking at in any detail. And it's not just about memory, it's about mood. So people that are depressed, generally, you can take a fecal sample and you can predict whether somebody is depressed by the makeup of the probiotics in their GI tract. So there have been some probiotics that have been developed or discovered that make people happier. So one of those strains that we're using is going to be in there. And we're actually using a really interesting delivery system. So the biggest problem with probiotics is stability. Will the bacteria survive where they need to go? So they need to get into your colon, into your small intestine. How do they get there? Well, they get there by staying alive and not being killed outside, whether it's from heat in the capsules where they're stored, but then also not destroyed by your stomach and your stomach acids and everything in there. So I think it should be pretty apparent to people that if you take a probiotic capsule and there's no delivery system, most of it's going to die in your stomach. It's not going to get where it needs to go. So we're using a system. It's a 4-stage kind of microencapsulation system. You have the probiotic itself in the middle. Then you have a fatty acid lipid membrane layer. Then you have a polysaccharide layer, the food that bacteria eats. Then you have an acid resistant layer on the outside. So you have this 4-layer everlasting gobstopper that
that's what I'm picturing. Yeah.
that will deliver that probiotic strain into the small intestine where it needs to go with its own food source, protected. That way, it'll actually get where it needs to go. Because taking probiotics and swallowing them, getting them into your stomach is not going to do anything. They just die, and then, okay, great. So these probiotics are going to use a really advanced delivery system to actually get them where they need to go. And we're using really interesting strains that do things that people probably don't realize can be done with a probiotic. So that's the cognitive one. It's for memory, it's for mood, it's for just overall cognition. And everybody that has beta tested it loves it.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Then we have our performance one. So that's going to be the -C version, the cognition version. The -P version is going to be the performance one. We're using probiotic strains that are in there that have actually improved metabolic health, improved muscle mass in elderly people that aren't even working out. So some of these probiotic strains, they've been proven to build muscle mass in sedentary people. So getting your microbiome to a state where it's more suited to be more athletic will make you more athletic by default without any work.
Do you want to say the strains on here, or no, keep that off? Confidential for now, because I don't want to push at all. Because I know a couple of them. I just wanted to. I don't make sure I talk about the same strains.
Yeah, so I'll wait till we finalize the formula.
That's cool.
I don't want to say what the final formula is, and sometimes we make changes and beta testing.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I like to know this stuff, and like my mind's going to like some of the things I'm doing with some small molecules with milk exosomes, using that as the vesicle to pack in pretty much anything to increase that bioavailability. I haven't looked into that, using that from a bacterial aspect, more like small molecule amino acid peptide wise, but that should be a pretty viable option as well. Just
we actually did work on exosomes. So do you know Ryon? RION?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So what the former research scientists from Ryon came to work with us for a little while.
Oh, cool.
And they do blood platelet exosomes. So they take human blood platelets, separate the exosomes from them, and then create products with those. He came over to our facility and we did exosome research on mushrooms. Like, he's like, hey, we're isolating these exosomes from human blood platelets. What if lion's mane has exosomes? So we actually did some interesting exosome research with lion's mane.
What'd you find there?
So we isolated lion's mane exosomes, so that they are there. We didn't find any of the bioactive molecules inside the exosome. So my theory was maybe the hericines, hericinones, or inosines are being put into exosomes, and those are being delivered through
Just the vesicle. Yeah.
the mycelium or wherever. We didn't find that. There's probably other really cool, interesting things in there, but we didn't find the primary bioactives we were looking to standardize to. So I think there's still some work there that we can do some interesting stuff on, but it's going to take a lot more work and a lot more time. It wasn't. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes it's easy, and you're like, I think this is going to happen, and then you do all the work, and it's like, nope. And then other times it's like, wow, shit, this is going to turn into a 5-year project. So we're still working on stuff like that. But yeah, exosomes are very interesting. And then you have all these other delivery systems, liposomes,
the nanoparticles. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize 90% of the liposomes on the market are fake.
Yeah.
They're not liposomes.
Yeah, the process takes so long.
Yeah. And there's people out there that are like, I can put anything into a liposome. I'm like, no, you can't. Like, that's not the way the chemistry works. So a big pet peeve of mine has been the industry's sort of move to these novel delivery systems and not doing the analytical chemistry to prove that they made what they say they did. So we're probably going to bring out real liposomes soon, but it's taken us a long time to do the actual science in the background to make sure they were real. You have to use cryo transmission electron microscopy. You've got to use digital light DLS. You've got to use a bunch of different methodologies that most analytical labs don't have to prove that you have an actual liposome. Same thing with exosomes. You've got to prove that you isolated the exosomes and that they're formulated right and that the lipid membrane is intact. And so the cool thing about what we're using with the probiotics, which you could probably put some probiotics into exosomes, I'd have to play around with that and see. But this delivery system it really is, you just form layers around it. It's like a microencapsulation system where you just do a multi-layered microencapsulation. And the coolest thing about it is it's not just protecting the probiotic, it's going to feed the probiotic as it gets released. And I think that sort of technology is something that people haven't thought of yet. It's like, okay, what are they going to do when they get there? If they don't have any food, they're not going to colonize the GI tract. So those two probiotics we're going to be releasing hopefully very soon. We're working with our partners out of Taiwan. So our partners in Taiwan, they're called Grape King. We've been working with them for many, many years. We've been doing lion's mane research for over a decade. Lion's mane has been one of the mushrooms we really put a lot of resources into. And we've always sold fruiting body mushrooms. So when I got into the mushroom side of the industry, not to jump around from microbiomes, but
you're good. Go ahead.
Lion's mane is one on a lot of people's minds. When we got into functional mushrooms, same as I did with probiotics, I'm like, I'm not an expert yet. Let me try and learn. And I met Jeff Chilton from Namex. And then he told me this story about Paul Stamets and how Paul Stamets is selling fraudulent product and it's not a real mushroom and there's no bioactives and it's just myceliated grain and it's mostly just grain left in there. So I went on this journey with Jeff Chilton to go, hey, this sounds like fraud. I'm all about that. Let's call out the fraud. So me and Jeff kind of went on this mission to educate people on, hey, if you're buying mushrooms, like lion's mane, it has to be lion's mane. It has to be the mushroom. And for a while, we stayed on that kind of thought process. It has to be the fruiting body. The fruiting body is where all the good stuff is. But then I started seeing research come out, specifically on lion's mane mycelium, that there were interesting compounds in the mycelium too. It wasn't one or the other. It wasn't fruiting body always good, mycelium always bad. Like with anything else, the deeper you get, the more you learn and you go, actually, it's a lot more nuanced than I thought in the beginning. So we said, okay, there's some really interesting things in lion's mane mycelium, but nobody's investigating them and nobody's creating a standardized product to them. And the main one that we thought was really interesting to start with is adenosine A. So adenosine A is an adenosine in the mycelium of lion's mane that hits nerve growth factor. So as we said with reference standards, it's really hard to analyze whether something's in there if you don't have a reference standard to do it. So I think that's one of the biggest limiting factors in the natural products industry itself is access to reference standards to be able to measure these things. So we were reading some papers on adenosine A written by a Polish researcher named Wojciech Krzyzkowski. And he's one of the most cited researchers on arenosine A. We were reaching out to all the researchers around the world that were doing research on arenosine A, seeing if they would collaborate with us. And we got a hold of Wojciech, and he's like, oh, yeah, let's do it. So we actually flew Wojciech out to our facility here in Arizona and had him do lion's mane research, where we isolated arenosine A, and we made the world's first arenosine A reference standard. So we bought a prep HPLC system. We got a bunch of material in, mycelium. We went through the whole process of isolating, and a lot of people probably don't know how reference standards are made, but it's really a fractionation process. And it's done usually with prep HPLCs, where an HPLC uses a column that has like little fingers that stick out in the column, generally a C18 column. So it's a carbon chain that's 18 carbons long, that like little fingers that stick out in the tube. And as molecules pass by when they're dissolved in a solvent, those fingers grab the molecules at different rates, depending on the solubility of the molecule. So that means as those molecules go through the column, they get separated from each other. And then as they come out of the other end of the column, that's where you see the peaks, right? That's the individual compounds coming out of the end of the column. Well, when you do an HPLC like that to measure something, as it comes out of the other end of the column, you're just using a UV detector and you're saying, okay, that's this compound and that's how much is in there. A prep HPLC does that, but then it fractionates into vials. So as these compounds are separated from each other, they then get put into different vials and you create different fractions. And you just do that over and over. You're like, all right, here's, the more lipid soluble fraction. All right, let's separate that into 6 fractions. Okay, here, it's in here. Let's separate that into 6 fractions. And eventually you separate enough, you get just pure compound that you're looking for. And that's how you create a reference standard. So that's what we did in our analytical lab here. I created a reference standard manufacturing part of our lab because I wasn't content to wait for Sigma Aldrich or Chromadex or these other companies that were making reference standards. If I had waited that long, we probably wouldn't have an arenosine A standardized lion's mane right now. So we had to be on the forefront of creating these standards to be able to make a product that had it. And ironically, now all the reference standards on the market are isolated from our Arenimax product. We released Arenimax, world's first arenosine A standardized lion's mane, and then places like Chromadex and others bought our Arenimax and then used that to isolate their own reference standards. And now it's commercially available. People can buy them. People can measure it. And we've kind of advanced that space. But so we knew that the mycelium of these mushrooms have a lot of really interesting compounds. And so we started developing that in the background, trying to figure out what are these bioactives in the mycelium? How do they differ from the ones in the fruiting bodies? How do we make reference standards for them? And then how do we make standardized products to them?
Question. What other bioactive compounds have you found that jump out to you that you haven't probably talked about yet publicly? Be like, I want to keep this in the back pocket and probably look at this down the line. You can say, I don't want to, again, put you in a bad position.
There's a lot of cool ones. We're working on a ton right now.
Tell me one.
So I do think the other arenosines in lion's mane are pretty cool. So arenosine A, that's the one we decided to work on first. We never said arenosine A is the end all be all. It's just one of them.
Yeah.
Arenosine C is really cool. We're actually working with the largest cancer research institute in the world right now, studying our Arenimax, but also the arenosines, hericines, hericinones in lion's mane for brain cancer specifically. And they have a model where they're doing like 3D modeling. We have a cell culture lab now. So I built out a cell culture lab. We have human brain cells.
I love how you just built everything. Like, I'm just going to go build it. I'll just slowly have this massive warehouse of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I built it out. I'm like, we're isolating all these cool novel bioactives.
Yeah.
Some of them have research on them. Some of them don't. When we isolate them, we're like, how do we know what this is going to do? Is this going to cause more neuronal growth? Is it going to cause more neuronal activity? How do we determine that? And I said, well, the only way I'm going to know how to do that is that I'm going to wait for other researchers to do it and then cite their research, or I'm going to build out a cell culture lab, culture human brain cells, and study it ourselves. So now we have a really cool. We're probably we for sure are the only supplement company in the world doing this stuff. But we have a pipeline of we can get novel plants and fungi from around the world. We can use our analytical machines to identify novel bioactives in those. We can use our prep systems to then isolate those and get pure versions of those bioactives. And then we can take those into our cell culture lab and expose them to brain cells and see, does it make the brain cells grow? Does it make the brain cells fire? So we actually have, it's called an IncuSite SX5. It's really cool cell culture machine because it'll do real-time video. And normally when you do cell culture, it's just a series of images, right? So you can see if the neurons are growing, each image, you can have a time lapse. But you can't see neurons firing. That's really quick. With the IncuSite SX5, we can. So we actually use a specific dye that reacts with the calcium. And the calcium signals are what, cause the electrical impulses to fire between neurons. And it actually uses a virus. It uses a virus to put this dye inside of the brain cells. And then once that dye is inside the brain cells, every time they fire, you see the on video.
That is cool.
And so we can measure it over time. We can take these novel bioactives from lion's mane, expose them to these brain cells, and then measure, are these brain cells firing more or less? So we can narrow down the bioactives we're looking at for neuronal activity.
So on the C, so I don't know if I could be wrong on what I've read research-wise. I might think about a different one. Was that more microglia related or no? Am I thinking of something else?
So I don't want to release too much because we're working with the Research Institute. But yeah, some of them, it looks like, are causing more cells to differentiate, but actually reduces the number of cells. So,
so you stop metastasization, but
the brain cells the total number of brain cells go down, but the cells that are there are differentiated into mature neurons. Then some other compounds actually cause the number of cells to go up, but not mature. So you can get combinations of arenosines that then, one of them is causing more neurons to grow, and the other one is maturing those neurons into mature brain cells.
Is there one that handles specific remyelination?
There is, yeah. And there are some that have direct receptor bindings too. So one of the arenosines, I won't say it because we're still doing some research on it, but we found one of the other more minor arenosines in the mycelium actually has a direct GABA binding. So it actually binds to the GABA receptor better than like a benzodiazepine does.
Interesting. So, and not allosteric modulation, like direct binding agonist wise?
Well, we haven't proven if it's an allosteric modulator, but it's binding to the pocket better. Like it's receptor binding studies where
geometry wise, you're getting better conformational change.
Yeah. So what we're going to be doing in our lab is receptor knockout studies. So we're going to study the neuronal growth and neuronal activity, figure out which of these compounds is causing more or less, and then use our ELISA receptor knockout to then knock out individual receptors and see when the effect that we measured goes away.
Oh, dude. So this is going to be awesome. So do you plan on having like a line of arenosine options? So like one for this reason, that reason, or are you doing like more of a conglomerate of less options? Because it seems like you get pretty into the weeds here.
Yeah, probably both. Because like not everybody reacts the same to everything. So if you look at our catalog, we have a lot of different versions of the same thing. We have a lot of ashwagandhas. We have a lot of bacopas, because everybody is different. So generally we try to release things on an individual level and then do our take on a more comprehensive one. But I think what we're seeing is it's not one compound. It's a combination of compounds all working together. And you said tiger milk. Tiger milk is one of my favorite mushrooms. And there's something with tiger milk. We're still trying to figure out in the lab the actual mechanisms for why it's happening. But the combination of tiger milk and lion's mane is not just additive. It causes so much better effects than any one individually. And we're actually using our systems right now to try and identify the novel bioactives in tiger milk to see if we can create a standardized version of that. And it's getting complex because when you talk about these bioactives, usually you're talking about small molecule organics, carbon-based molecules that are small. There's a whole other world of large molecules that nobody's even measuring or talking about. Beta-glucans are one of them that people talk about, but people don't realize that the limitations of measuring beta-glucans are really, really bad. Currently, the Megazyme kit is the best way to measure beta glucans, and it's just bad. It's
yeah,
wrong.
I didn't think it was that good.
No. It's an enzymatic technique where you use a UV vis, you measure total glucans in a sample, you react it to some specific enzymes, then you measure total glucans again, and the difference is the beta glucans. Yeah. But it's so susceptible to adulteration, to matrix interferences, to all sorts of different things. And it also supposes that all beta glucans are good and all alpha glucans are bad.
Yeah.
But chitin is a beta glucan. So the chitin is what makes up a big part of the cell wall of all fungi. And chitin is an inactive beta glucan, but it is a beta glucan. There are other alpha glucans that are really bioactive. You might know one, AHCC. Yep. So AHCC is a mushroom from shiitake. It's a liquid culture maitake standardized to the alpha glucan fraction from shiitake. And that obviously is having really good effects on immune system. But if you measured it with the Megazyme kit, it would be starch, right? Because it's an alpha glucan, not a beta glucan. So this whole concept and paradigm of beta glucan's good, alpha glucan's bad is just wrong. So even if we could measure them properly, it's built on a foundation that just isn't correct. So
how are you going to change that foundation to differentiate?
I'm building something else. So
okay, what are you building? I want to hear. At least what you can say. I understand. Yeah,
so we're building another part of our lab right now. We met a seaweed researcher up in Alaska. He's been doing seaweed research in Alaska for 10 years. And in seaweeds, you have fucoidins, which are like the beta-glucans of the seaweed world. They're the polysaccharides of seaweed. And there's a lot of really interesting benefits of seaweed. So he was studying these seaweeds up there off the coast of Alaska for pharmaceutical research. And the company that he was working with...
Was it stem cell related?
Pardon?
Was it stem cell release related?
There was a lot they were trying.
Okay.
They promised him we were going to do all this really interesting, novel research to find these bioactives for use in pharmaceutical science. And eventually they're like, we can just make way more money selling a commodity product from these seaweeds as a food stabilizer. So this company built all this lab out, got him there, got him all excited about doing this novel bioactive research, and then said, well, there's way more money in just isolating this food stabilizer from seaweed to mix into breads and, all the other shit out there.
Great.
So yeah,
more bread.
This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I'm passionate about. So we're working with him now. There was a piece of equipment up there that's like a $500,000 piece of equipment that is going to allow us to characterize polysaccharides. So it's called a size exclusion chromatography.
Okay.
So when you look at an HPLC, right, you're using columns to separate stuff out from each other that are dissolved in a liquid, and the columns separate by their solubilities, essentially. As molecules pass by those little C18 fingers in the column, they grab onto them, and then they separate just by their solubility, their polarity. Size exclusion chromatography is for separating large molecules, polysaccharides, beta-glucans, things that are just much, much, much bigger than any of these small molecule organics that we're separating. Size exclusion chromatography separates these things coming out by their size. Well, the crazy thing about polysaccharide research, beta-glucan research, alpha-glucan research, it doesn't matter if it's a beta-glucan and alpha-glucan. What matters is how long is the glucan, how long is the polysaccharide, and what is its branching structure. So when you look at a polysaccharide, you've got length and you've got branching structure. The longer and the more branched the polysaccharides are, the more immune modulating they are, because you have these receptors in your gut called dectin-1 receptors. And when you have a dectin-1 receptor here and here, if you branch them, then that causes your immune system to elevate and go, okay, I need to get ready to fight stuff off. So that's how these beta-glucans and polysaccharides are improving your immune system. They are branching the dectin-1 receptors. Well, if a beta-glucan is too short to branch the two receptors, it doesn't matter that it's a beta-glucan. It's not going to do anything beneficial for your immune system. So it's less alpha-glucan's bad, beta-glucan's good. It's long and branched polysaccharides are better than short and non-branched polysaccharides. So
have you seen that longer branch research more for like thymic gland activity?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
You can have really, really long. You can have medium long.
Yeah.
You can have
What's
long.
the cutoff, right? Because obviously, like longer and more branched isn't always going to be better immune system wise, right? So what's
Because
what's
it
that?
also has to get into the areas that it needs to go. And I think you can probably over branch. So if you branch too many dectin-1 receptors, then it'd be counterproductive. So it's not just the longest branched polysaccharides are best. There's a sweet spot.
Yep.
I don't know that sweet spot yet because the size exclusion chromatography hasn't come in, but we're finally going to be able to characterize these polysaccharides in a way that makes sense. It's not, hey, we're using a Megazyme kit and it tells us beta glucans, alpha glucans. It's here's a full profile of the polysaccharides in this fungi or in this seaweed, and here's what we think is going to happen with the immune system when you consume these.
When's that supposed to come in?
We're Agilent, if you're listening, we need a box for the Agilent machine piece because it's shipping from Canada. We want it to be super protected. Yeah. We're just waiting for Agilent to get us the original box to be able to ship this piece of the equipment in.
Yeah.
So if anybody from Agilent's listening, please send us the box so that we can get
Probably
this.
not, but hopefully.
But yeah, so there's a lot of problems with the Megazyme kits.
Yeah.
Right now at Future Nutri Foundation, we're doing a round of testing on lion's mane. We're doing the world's most comprehensive lion's mane test. And I don't say that lightly. Like we're doing the most robust round of testing on lion's mane ever devised. We've got about 20 lion's mane products from the market. And I think we have six or eight different labs all working together on all sorts of different pieces of analyzing these lion's mane. And the results are going to be pretty. I'm concerned about the results because when we release them, it's going to make national news, for sure.
How so?
Some people failed that are going to surprise people and failed in a way that.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, big companies.
Yeah, we won't go there. We'll keep drama free.
We got to up our publisher insurance before we.
Yeah, you don't get rated again.
Yeah, well, and it's the Future Nutri Foundation. It's a nonprofit. It would be in bad form for.
It's still going to blow back on you.
And probably me personally. Like the Future Nutri Foundation isn't just me. I'm just one person on the board. Yeah. It's people from all over the industry all collaborating together. But I'm obviously someone that is a lightning rod sometimes. So I fully expect these brands to lash out against me. So you might see us in some lawsuits soon.
Yeah. I'll repost them on Instagram.
Yeah. After you fight the federal government, civil lawsuits are like, whatever.
Right. So question on the lion's mane. Since you're doing all this research, there's that small subset that has that post-lion's mane syndrome. Same with PFS, PAS, that whole world, which is real. It's a small subset, but it's a real thing. Do you know, because I haven't been able to find any specific molecular interaction, any constituent, any bioactive, anything that points towards what's causing that specifically? Have you found anything that you go, oh, maybe that would drive more of that kind of neurological degeneration or some receptor decay or anything like that?
So the traditional thought by that community, and I think that community is very, very small. They're just very loud. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very small subset. We have so much high lion's mane. It's like 0.1% of the population. It's something very, very small. But when you have something go wrong and you're upset about it, you get loud and you try to spread it everywhere. So I think it makes it seem bigger than it is. But the traditional thought of that community was it's 5-alpha reductase. You're lowering your DHT. It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not that. They found one study of one Hericium species in a single study that had that effect. It wasn't even Hericium erinaceus. It was a completely different one. And actually, reishi has way more 5-alpha reductase activity than lion's mane, but nobody's saying reishi's causing it. So it's definitely not that. What I think is happening in a small subset of people is there are erinacines and hericines, hericinones in lion's mane that I think can activate the kappa opioid receptor in such a way that causes dysphoria. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's kind of like a dysphoric sort of.
Yeah. I ask because I've worked with so many people over the years. It's such a real thing. It's a small subset, but it destroys those people's lives. But the problem is I've seen it happen now from ashwagandha, finasteride, Adderall. Like it seems like it's not so much compound specific. It's almost like I hate saying that underlying epigenetic problem, but there's something underlying that's going haywire that's being triggered from something. And I think lion's mane and finasteride just kind of got like the biggest news around it.
Exactly.
So I always just like to bring that up with people just because.
Like, look, I went through depression myself. I'm not trying to go, well, what did I take at the time that caused it? Like, it's just something my brain went through because I was genetically predisposed to it. I think these people are having the same thing. Yeah. They're genetically predisposed to depression, dysphoria, and something sets it off. It could be anything. It could be a food. It could be an environmental trigger. It could be lion's mane. It could be ashwagandha. It could be whatever.
Yeah.
There's no central link. Like, it's completely different compounds in ashwagandha to lion's mane to,
I guess the craziest part for me is the side effect profile is the same. It is ridiculously so similar. And you get those effects that like the elastic skin where it stretches all the way out to here. DHT gets tanked technically from a binding aspect, but not on a plasma aspect in blood. It's a wacky disease for sure. So I always try and ask, because I got some good success reversing that over there with a lot of people, but with post lion's mane syndrome, post finasteride.
How did you reverse it?
Oh God, that's a whole long conversation. So that's part of the problem, right? Because there hasn't been one area, one individual. We need to pretty much bolus some epigenetic compounds and a lot of DHT to literally overwhelm androgen receptors and improve that binding affinity constant.
DHT, our Tribugen product, massively increases DHT.
I've used that before. Yeah, it works super well in that crowd. Yeah. But then other people, it was almost all neurochemical. Other people, it's almost all epigenetic, and we handle chromatin from like a decondensation and from an unrolling aspect. So like a Vylon and Livogen tend to work pretty well, but there's been no like go-to protocol. There's been like 1,000 things that have worked, but it's the combination for the person. That's why it's been so tough. That's why it's I mean, I feel so bad for those people. It's interesting as a disease because it's like so hard to figure out.
It's kind of like long COVID.
Yeah. Wow. Man, that's a whole other conversation with the spike proteins, what's going on with retroviruses. And we won't get onto that.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I got COVID, I've had not long COVID, but I think some similar. I've always been very quick. I memorize a lot of things. I know a lot of things. I always know exactly what I want to say. I got COVID and then it deleted a lot of words. Yeah. And not like permanently, but it's probably not the best way to say it, but it makes me sound retarded now because I know exactly what I want to say. And I've always been fairly eloquent at being able to say that quickly. But post-COVID, it's like I know the word I'm trying to say. It just deletes it for a little while. And then eventually I catch up and I remember the word. But it's definitely something that immediately happened post-COVID. And it's a fairly common thing, I think, people that are having long COVID symptoms, where it just kind of deletes word. It affects their language center.
Have you looked specifically at the interaction with microtubules?
No.
So what I think it's coming back to that. So I believe, could be wrong, but it stops that polymerization process of tubules into microtubules. And then there's actual no connection of neural networks to consciousness. And then that starts to slowly delete those memory banks and long-term starts to atrophy from a neural aspect. Whether it's a hippocampal problem or something, you get that firing of the amygdala. There's definitely atrophy of the hippocampus, but only in certain regions, certain areas, and certain degrees. But I found there's an ultrasound. I like to use it on a lot of people to polymerize microtubules. Tubules into microtubules. 5 minutes under the thermal threshold, or else you open up the blood-brain barrier. But just 5 minutes per day on each side of your temple from a neurochemical aspect starts to polymerize those microtubules. And that's helped a lot of people in the whole long COVID world. And it can only be explained with the microtubular conversation. There's also a mitochondrial millivoltage aspect that goes down. So with long COVID, you go to like negative 20 millivolts. Like it's terrible. You need to be upwards like negative 150, negative 200. And that's where like something like mitochondric acid will come in because it'll fix mitophyllin on that inner mitochondrial membrane and start to kind of crank levels up again.
Yeah, and I think it is related to the spike protein.
So question on that. So you're an intelligent guy, so I like getting everyone's opinion on this when we're talking. Sure. Do you believe the spike protein is more electrochemical mediated or more electromagnetic mediated? If you had to pick one or two.
I think chemical. And your body makes the spike protein, right? Like that's the COVID vaccine causes your body to make the spike protein, or you can get the spike protein from having COVID and then it's latent. But I think, I think it's an electrochemical reaction. I think it causes systemic inflammation. It causes neuroinflammation. I think it really, I don't want to simplify it down into something this simple, but I think it really just tricks your body into thinking it's still infected. And your body raises the general level of inflammation all over, like it's trying to fight it off. And it just never calms back down. It's like a autoimmune disease almost. Yep.
It's super. So I love getting everyone's opinions just because it helps you try and figure out these problems faster. I always saw it more as like the electromagnetic side of things, and that's what's triggering the retroviruses to kick back up, because it destroys that whole methylation acetylation process, and then what you didn't have before, now it's kicked back on, because we technically have every virus and pathogen in our system. It's just activated or not type thing. Again, who knows? But I like asking people just to get differing opinions and changing perspectives, you know?
Well, I talked with some doctors here up in Scottsdale, and they've had really good effects with mesenchymal stem cell therapy.
Yeah.
And
like nebulized and intranasal.
Yep. And the way they do it up here, at the Mayo Clinic, the thing with stem cells is you get a lot of opinions on stem cells. Stem cells work, stem cells don't work. And the reason for that is they have to be very fresh stem cells. Like most people doing stem cell therapy are using weeks or month-old stem cells. They're not fresh enough, and they've denatured, and they're not going to be effective. What they do up here with the Mayo Clinic, they get stem cells from umbilical cords right as the mother gives birth, and then they take those stem cells. The next day, they're putting them into patients with stem cell therapy.
Nice.
So it's like really, really fresh. And then there is some data on the exosome piece that it may not be the stem cells themselves. It may be the exosomes that the stem cells are giving off right away.
And it's a tough conversation too, because then you get into like, now we have closomes. You can just package a ton of clotho into exosomes. You have the muse cells. We have small mobile stem cells from SMS Biotech. They're like 3 microns. They're free. I just did a treatment last week. Actually, I did a microdose. Was that 120 million over 5 days, so 600 million total of SMS cells. And man, the difference between like a muse cell treatment, that's like the new age of like stem cell technology. That's kind of got to know someone to have access to it, but there's really cool research.
What do you feel after the therapy?
So what was cool, what was super crazy is that my HSCRP went, like it's never been really high. I mean, I train pretty hard and everything, so it's maybe like a 0.8. It was less than 0.2. Which I've never seen. LPA was less than 10. ApoB dropped from 103 to 80 or so. It wasn't all just from the SMS cells, but the overall feeling of, right? So HRV went up, resting heart rate went down, inflammation. My left elbow has always been pretty sore. That went away within 2 days. That was after 240 million. Pretty much, if you could just think of global healing, it's pretty much what we saw. I'm trying with some people that are actually nebulizing it, that have more like past TBIs or like neurochemical trauma, maybe drug abuse and things like that. So we're seeing.
If your elbow stop hurting in 2 days, then it's reducing systemic inflammation quick.
Correct. So what I'm trying to figure out now is how much actual, because it drives a lot of genomic expression. So you're seeing a lot of more genes being turned on, which is cool. And I think there's one more on the, what is that? RunX2, right? For like bone metabolism, things like that. Because like I do a lot of barefoot work and my feet have been hurting me. Just from like walking outside, playing with the kids, jumping around, no shoes on type thing. And the bones of my feet have been hurting. And after that first day, that was gone. It was very rapidly noticed, but it was like, you've worked out hard, like that bone crushing pain versus a muscular pain, bone pain was gone. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
I'll have to try that maybe.
I'll connect you.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. And what's your opinion on BPC 157?
Absolutely amazing. Just 15 or 20 years old. So BPC, TB, still amazing compounds. Again, they're always going to be the bread and butter type ones. Some of the newer ones we've come out with, like one's VD11. I actually found it in a frog. So it was what allows them and salamanders to regenerate their spinal column. And VD11, we kind of theorized, okay, if it's driving massive spinal column regeneration, look at the research, it kind of drives overall regeneration of every system, every organ, like makes sense, right? And so had it synthesized through the background chemistry. And the cool thing about that was we saw, especially we were talking about the gut microbiome earlier, the changes there have been absolutely phenomenal. We see the global, actually this morning I made a post on my group, we're seeing more fertility rates going up, which we didn't expect with it. The problem is it's dose dependent. If you take too high of a dose, we're finding out your senses are heightened, right? Which is cool. But I did this in the dead of winter. And at first I was standing in my kitchen and my kids were over playing and like I smelled all this urine. I'm like, did I step in dog pee? And one of my kids peed in their diapers. And then the next day I went outside to go take my normal walk and it was like 20 degrees. Like I could handle that. No big deal. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't even get into my sauna. So your perception of overall heightened senses went up dramatically. We've been seeing that with a lot of people as long as you don't dose it too high. But what I wanted to try and use it for was to modulate the cryptochrome in your eyes so you could see the magnetic fields of cell towers, cell phones, people, organ stressors. It didn't do that, obviously, but that's where I was thinking it might go. But things like, so that's a pretty novel compound besides my group. No one really knows about it. But there's this whole new iteration of small molecules that we're just seeing some cool things like BPC, the original question, still amazing. There's just like this whole new wave that's coming out.
Yeah, and I've been out of peptides for a while, so I haven't been deep into the more advanced side of things.
Dude, you're figuring out the lion's mane exosomes. I want to be the first one to try those. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and we're actually doing some peptide research in plants too. Like plants make peptides, and so we're developing a protein now. What we did for fiber with Infinifiber, I'm doing for protein. I'm going through the chemistry of protein and the peptide fragments and the signaling molecules. And
that's cool.
And we're going to make the world's most advanced protein powder.
So you're going to try and get more nitrogen retention out of the same amount of protein?
Yeah, well, and you know, signaling molecules like lactalbumin, lactoferrin. There's the new PeptiStrong. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah, I love that. The dileucines, there's a couple things.
Yeah, so and then it's a pretty complex formula right now. We'll have to see how it all pans out.
It's like 50 things long.
So generally we do that. We kind of like develop, here's, if we went balls to the wall, this is what we would do. And then we price it out and go, maybe
$300.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be an expensive protein, but we'll see how all the stuff fits together. But I think it's going to be the most well thought out protein powder ever put out. So essentially cool. what we did for Infinifiber, we're going to do for protein.
That is so cool. Well, dude, this has been a fantastic podcast. I appreciate you so much for coming on. The new products coming out, I'm pumped to try them all. Like literally as soon as they're available for purchase, or if you need any beta testers, I love testing stuff. And then I have a whole crowd and population of people that would love to try it out as well. So as it comes out or becomes available, I can push it out or whatever. But before we go, I'll put all the links down in the description box below for everyone who's listening in. Website, follow you, like plans for the future of Nootropics, like where they're going to follow, like the new news for Nootropics Depot. Yeah,
I mean, obviously our subreddit, r/NootropicsDepot, is where we have the biggest community of people. Like we started on Reddit. We still interact a lot on Reddit. We have a podcast called In Search of Insight, where our product specialists, Emil and Erica, go through a lot of what we do more in a podcast format. I've been doing, more shorter form podcasts myself. And then, I like sign up for our newsletter. We're always trying to interact with people. But I'd say if you really want to follow what we're doing, our podcast, In Search of Insight, and then our Reddit, our subreddit, r/NootropicsDepot. And I'm still a Redditor at heart. I pulled back a little bit from Reddit just because I'm super busy doing all sorts of stuff. But you'll see me on there occasionally talking with people, getting feedback. And I think that's one big difference between us and a lot of other brands. We genuinely listen to what everybody's saying. Like we started in a community driven format. The Nootropics community is really, community driven research. Hey, I took this compound, I got this effect. Oh, I wonder why that is. Like, let's find a study. It's all very much people coming together and saying, hey, I got this interesting effect from this thing. Why do you think that is? So we have that a lot on our subreddit. They go, hey, have you seen this new interesting supplement? Oh, no. And we've developed a lot of ingredients and supplements because of stuff that people have turned us on to on our subreddit. So if that sort of thing interests you, come into our subreddit would be the way to participate in that.
That is super cool. And guys, I'll put links down to everything in the description box below. And otherwise, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.